and welcome back to my channel. My name is Aspasia. This is my channel, Aspasia Reading, and if you're new here, welcome. Thank you for joining. Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening. My thumbnail's probably gonna be a little misleading. I'm not reading a single one of those books in the thumbnail. I just picked those out because they match a little bit. We're gonna talk about that in a second. So in February, my main TBR goal is going to be ebooks for very specific reading. I think I'm going into a bit of a slump, but I'm not entirely sure because it doesn't feel like a typical reading slump for me. It feels different, and so I'm starting to question whether or not I'm in an actual slump or if I have different reading tastes now. Okay, so I just made a couple adjustments to the camera because it was starting to bother me, but this I think is better. Basically what I'm saying is I'm not entirely sure if I'm in a reading slump or if maybe my reading tastes are changing. I noticed that books other than contemporaries and romances and graphic novels are holding my attention right now. Very occasionally I will pick up something else, but I noticed that my reading experience with them and my enjoyment for them, my excitement for them definitely dwindles. I noticed like a decrease in my interest and excitement and etc. before reading, during reading, and after reading those books. Right now it's January when I'm filming this, and my TBR was to read a couple of fantasies, right? That is not happening, unfortunately. I don't know what it is, but fantasies are just not holding my attention right now. I can't do it. Like, normally I would love a good villain, some sword fighting, some magic systems, some evil queen in a castle, a girl running away, something, you know, typical fantasy stuff. Can't do it. I just don't know what it is. I can't read it. And it doesn't feel like a typical slump. It just feels like I don't want to read it. And so this morning, yesterday, I was looking into my past couple years of reading through Goodreads. You know, they have the My Year in Books feature. And I was also looking at my Goodreads, not my Goodreads, my Google Sheets thing that I use to track my reading. I haven't completely filled out 2020. Even with it not being completely filled out, it's still showing me the exact same thing that I thought was going to be there. My primarily reading genres, or primarily read genres in 2019 and 2020, was romance, contemporaries, and I think fantasy is like 3rd or 4th place for both years. Which is weird because I always picture myself as primary fantasy reader. That's basically what I grew up on. Shadowhunters. You know, recently Lee Bardugo, Marissa Meyer, Warrior Cat series, Maximum Ride. There's a bunch of other authors. I'll put like a big screenshot of like the different authors, and I'll even show you some of my books. Like, there's literally primarily fantasy. Like, if I were to pick up a contemporary or anything else back a couple years ago, y'all would have been shook. I mean, then again, y'all didn't know me then. I didn't have a YouTube channel then. I don't know. It's just having a bit of a crisis because I'm like, am I changing as a reader, or am I just in a really weird slump that doesn't feel like a slump? I want to read, it's just what I'm picking up is not what I want to read. I went from TBR of like multiple fantasies to just completely trashing it, backing out all the readathons I was gonna do, doing a whole bunch of contemporaries and romances for the rest of the month. Like, I can't get to it. If anything else that I'm reading, it's gonna be for school textbooks. Like, that's literally it. Like, I can't bring myself to read anything else. I want to read some Shadowhunters right now, which is very typical of me. Like, when I'm in this weird mood of reading, it's always romances, contemporary, and Shadowhunters. I have decided that my February TBR is not going to be a bunch of set book titles that I tell you. My February TBR is going to be a bunch of books from my NetGalley, because I have a lot of arcs I would like to finish, and a lot of them I'm really interested in, which again, I don't think I'm going to do, because I want to say a good 50% of them is fantasy or has some kind of fantasy element. So there's that. I really want to read a lot of what's on my Kindle, because a lot of those are like free books that I found because they were free that day, and they're like romance. So I want to get through all of those, get that like backlist cleaned out. And I just have a bunch of Libby books coming in. Again, all contemporary romances, which I also noticed a thing. I noticed that I'm not requesting as many fantasies as I used to be. Like, I went through my holds. I was like, okay, what's coming in the next couple weeks? Let me work through my TBR. Contemporary, romance, fantasy, which is like a 6 month hold wait. Thriller, contemporary, romance, thriller. And I'm like, all these fantasies I've been talking about reading for 2021, and they're like nowhere to be seen. In my bullet journal, my read ASAP, only put 2 fantasies on that list. Like, I generally don't, I don't know. And it's like, if I am not a fantasy reader, what am I doing? What am I gonna do? I know many people on YouTube are not primarily fantasy readers. There's Avery who loves books, who likes romance. There's Brittany who books, there's a lot of contemporary. There's Riley who does romance and thrillers and stuff. There's Kristen for Kristen's Corner and Amanda who does not reads, who do a lot of like thrillers and romance. It's like, I like know that's a thing, but it's just weird to imagine me not being fantasy. Like, that's all I've known, that's all I've done. How in the world am I not gonna be a fantasy reader? So I'm having a bit of a reading midlife crisis. I don't know if I'm a fantasy reader anymore. If I'm not a fantasy reader, what the fuck am I gonna do with all these books? What am I gonna do with all this? What am I doing with all of this? Like, let me bring it closer so you can see this mess. Primarily fantasy. Primarily fantasy. Primarily fantasy. And then there's textbooks. Primarily fantasy. What am I gonna do with these books? Yeah, so long story short, I think I've already said this. I'm sorry for repeating myself. I'm kind of like confused and wild everywhere. I'm still kind of like sitting on it. So I do have a week and a half left of January to like really figure out what I'm doing. But as of right now, I don't know if I'm a fantasy reader anymore. Like, I can't bring myself to read it. Like, I'm excited for the books. I'll buy the book and it'll sit on my shelf and it will sit there. And it sits there. And it sits there. I have picked up a couple fantasies. I got them on Libby. I read like 10% of it through, immediately returned it because I couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't do it. I don't know what it is. I can't do it. So, for February, my TBR is basically any contemporary romance that I find. That could be one book genre or 2 different genres, contemporary and romance. Or graphic novel that I find that I really want to read. Basically, it's probably going to be all through Libby, NetGalley, and my Kindle. Because, again, I don't even want to pick up a physical book. Like, because for me, physical books immediately kind of tie into fantasy. That's how I always been. Wow, I can't speak. Reading physically has always been fantasy for me. And then ebooks was literally everything else. So, I will be participating, or attempting to participate in the Pixarathon Part 2, aka the Woody's Roundup Readathon, Toy Story Readathon, hosted by Literary Lily. I'll be linking that down below in the description. As a matter of fact, let me pull out my thing for that. It's basically a Toy Story themed readathon. There's not much competition. You can join teams, you get points, but it's not really like competition feeling. She's trying to make it a bit more fun, a bit more relaxed. I think I'm going to do the Team Sunnyside Daycare, which is hosted by Helen from, this is her Twitter, HELWID87. This again, Sunnyside Daycare. When Andy's toys find themselves at Sunnyside Daycare isn't quite what it seems. A seemingly innocent setting is controlled by Lotso and his crew. To be Team Sunnyside, you need to collect Lotso and all of his henchmen. We'd also suggest stealing Andy's toys as they too find themselves there. And so characters to collect, or my prompts, are Barbie, Lotso, Stretch, Monkey, Big Baby, and Ken. Characters to steal, so like you can read other prompts or other books and steal characters. Any of Andy's toys. And then there's a group/team book, which is The Strange Worlds Travel Agency by L.D. Lipinski. Never heard of the book. Honestly, didn't even look it up. I know it's there. Probably not going to read it because it sounds like a fantasy. I really want to participate in it just because I like Lily's channel and her content. I really like Pixarathon. I'm just scared that, again, this reading slump is going to, like, screw me over. So let me tell you about the prompts for that. So for Lotso, read a book you had forgotten about. For Ken, read a book with a pretty cover. Big Baby, read a book you are intimidated by. Stretch, read a book set near the sea or at sea. Monkey, read an audiobook or a book with a loud cover. Barbie, a book you have unrealistic expectations for. Those seemed like the easier prompts for me to do, so it shouldn't be too difficult to complete with my reading status that I do in February. Who even knows? So yeah, I don't think I'm gonna steal any of Andy's toys yet. I kind of want to see where things go and then work my way into stealing any toys. This readathon does last a month, so if I'm able to complete all those promises, maybe I'll steal toys. But there is a announcement video and a Google Drive folder thing with like all the information. If you're interested in this readathon, I will link all that information down below. I do think it's to be a little difficult for me to explain it all without like messing it up or mixing up things. So I'll leave that all down below. Lily does a great way of explaining that for us. Yeah, that's how my February is going to be. Just figuring out if I'm still a fantasy reader and reading a bunch of whatever I'm in the mood to read. If you have any suggestions of like YouTubers that aren't primarily fantasy that I should watch, please let me know down below. If you have any books that you think I should read that are not primarily fantasy or like the main arc of it is fantasy, let me know. Because I am struggling. Again, if you have any suggestions, any recommendations, any tips, let me know. I'm stuck. Like, stuck. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for supporting, for commenting, for following, etc. Have a good night, day, afternoon, or whatever time it is where you are, and I'll see you in a future video.